But today, a topic I'm wanting to cover is in regard to behavior. There's several topics I've wanted to speak on and create presentations on for a while, and this has definitely been at the top of my list. Um, it is behavior. In regards to behavior, it's often a key component of many trainings in regards to foster care and adoptions for foster care. Obviously, it's a big part of what we're doing here today. What you'll tend to find is that in regards to trainings, they'll often spend multiple days doing this. We're not spending multiple days, but often they do because it's such a it is such a topic that we covered, and it's challenging for many folks. And I find that often in the material when they're trying to approach this, they try to approach it in a specific way. Often the first session of the training, they'll start looking at what you have done with historically with your own birth kids, or maybe how your parents did when they were raising you and other folks in your life, and some traditional ways of discipline and behavioral management, if I can call it that. And often you start looking at reviewing the past, they have you feeling horrible, start thinking that maybe everything in the words you did was abusive, and yet somehow here you are, you're sane and hopefully a decent person, you turned out okay, and yet you start wondering about everything you've ever done. And then, of course, in the next section, they start talking about, well, what maybe you should have done, maybe how you should have talked about it, maybe how you should have dealt with that situation. And it's just, and there often there's some good material in it, and they, it's some good things in the training. But at the end of the day, sometimes sometimes a little insulting, and sometimes it kind of doesn't, it misses the mark just a little bit. Often what they're trying to do though is get across a point that's incredibly true, though they don't always get to the point very well. And the point that they're trying to get to is really a very simple one, and it's just this: things that may have worked well with you and worked well when you were raising your birth children, or worked well when your parents were raising you and your grandparents or whoever was helping raising you as a kid, they may work fine for you, but those same things may not work at all when you're trying to take care of a child who has a history of intense trauma, of intense abuse and severe neglect, of children of great loss. You'll find that with children with trauma, a trauma history, that some things that worked okay with you may not work well, may not work at all. In fact, the matter is, may even be harmful. They may even be making things much, much worse. And that's the simple truth of it is when we caring for kids with a history of trauma, we need to look at it a little differently. We need to approach it a little differently. And of course, that's not saying there's any silver bullets. There are no silver bullets in regards to dealing with behavior. There's certainly some things you need to be thinking about. Now, it's interesting because I'll tell you something. I had this knowledge in my head for a long time, but I had an experience that really took this knowledge from my head and kind of sunk it into my heart. This idea of just of how true it is that you have to approach this differently with kids with trauma. It's actually a foster family that helped sink this message into my heart for me. Years ago, many years ago, I was working with a family out in the woods of North Carolina. It's less woods now, but it was definitely woods back then. And the role that I had years ago was I was working with a therapeutic foster care agency, and so we were working with kids with special needs and working with families. And when you're working with therapeutic foster care, you don't tend to be working with kids just right in your county. You're often those kind of agencies. You tend to be working with kids in multiple counties. And in my role, I was traveling all over the place. And if a kid was having a rough time, or some families going through some stuff, I might be at that family's home several times in a month, even several times a week sometimes. But I'd be up there quite a bit. And I found that if I had already been at a family's house and I didn't necessarily need to meet them at their house, that often, it was pleasant just to call and say, hey, we're meeting. How about we meet in town, get some coffee or get a bite to eat and discuss this stuff? And you'd be amazed at how much nicer people like you when you're feeding them or you give them some coffee. You know, it helps relationships. Anyway, so I had this one family who I was out going out to see, Claire, and I had already been at the house multiple times that month, and it seemed like I was having to pick up paperwork or something. And so I called her up and I said, Claire, I said, I've got to meet with you again. I don't know for sure what it was, but I need to meet with you. So we've already met your house though. I said, how about we meet in town and go get a bite to eat? And Claire, she says, Kevin, she says, that sounds great. I'd love to do that. She says, but I've got to tell you, Chris, and this is this little boy she had in her care at that time. She says, Chris is having a really bad day at school. In fact of the matter is, school has called me, begging me to pick him up. She said, I've got to go get him. She said, after I get him, she said, I also have some things I just got to do. So I've got to run to Walmart, pick up some things. I just have to. She said, how about we meet at the Walmart and then from there just decide where we want to get a bite to eat? I said, awesome, let's do it. That sounds great. Now, I clearly wasn't thinking this thing through. And as much as I love Claire and as amazing as she is, she wasn't thinking this thing through either. Because just think about this. If this kid is having a bad day at school, what's a trip to Wally World going to be like? You got it. It's going to be a disaster. Things are going to go from bad to worse. Because if there's a place where a child is going to throw down and show themselves, it is going to be in the most public arena in the world, either the grocery store or it's just, it is what it is. You know, it's going to this place of chaos, and chaos is going to ensue. Well, so I travel up there, and I'm, again, kind of in the woods of North Carolina, country area, and I get out there, and I get into the Walmart, and I'm walking in there, and man, it doesn't take us a hot second to see Chris and Claire are already there because Chris was in throwdown mode. Now, you hear people talk about and kind of describe temper tantrums, and what does a normal temper tantrum kind of look like? Well, normally what you have is a child, they're often they'll throw themselves on the floor, and they'll kick and holler and scream and cry, crocodile tears, crying out. And usually it's embarrassing and frustrating, but it's not usually harmful. And so it's just kind of a frustration. That was not Chris. Chris's tantrums were a whole nother level. Chris, when he was going into a tantrum, he went into rage mode. At least that's kind of how I thought of it, but it's rage mode. The description of it is, I tend to think of, when I think of Chris in this rage mode, I think of him in like the old Looney Tunes, that Tasmanian Devil, how he goes into a spin and just kind of a tornado going everywhere, destroying everything around him. Well, Chris was a Tasmanian Devil, but he went into his tantrum mode, his rage mode. And he was in full-blown rage mode now. He was just in his destructive mode. And so I'm seeing this. I'm seeing this going on there in this Walmart. And now this is going to tell you how awesome I am and how what a giant heart I have. I'm seeing this situation and I think to myself, wonderful. I get to see how my family is going to handle this situation. It doesn't even dawn on me to help. I'm sitting back just watching, what's going on there. And I'm watching, and I got to tell you, Claire was amazing in this. She was just really, really amazing. One thing that she did, the most immediate thing she did was something very simple. She just pushed that cart aside, pushed it away. Now, what a lot of people don't realize, part of the reason that we tend to get these battles in Walmart or the grocery store is because it is such a public arena that it invites a power struggle. Kids pick up on this change of dynamics. They pick up on this. They pick up on the fact that there are lots of witnesses, and we're going to tend to be a little different in how we handle this situation because there's a public out there. And they often discover they have a little power in the setting. And that's part of why they start throwing down in this arena, because they realize they can do something a little different. Well, Claire didn't get into that power struggle. She just push that cart aside. It was funny because later I would talk about it with her. And so talking about the brilliance of doing that, and she laughed at me. She said, "Kevin, this may surprise you, but they actually had people who are hired to put that stuff back up." Well, the next thing she then did something that maybe not every family would be able to do it, and I wouldn't encourage it with every family, and I wouldn't encourage it with kids any bigger than your waist, anyways. Um, but again, with Claire, it's a little different. I probably need to explain Claire just a little bit. Do you remember the old, speaking of Looney Tunes, the old Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd and all them? But you remember the Looney Tunes version of the opera? When the Looney Tunes version of opera, you often had this larger than life operatic woman, this Brunhilde, like Haggard Haggard the Horrible's wife, broad woman, not fat, just broad, strong woman with these long blonde braids and this Viking horn helmet. Well, that was Claire without the horns. Just a larger than life woman, not fat, but big, strong woman. Just a bit larger than life. And and so here is Chris. He's doing his throwdown, and Claire, when she sees this little guy, she just reaches down and picks him up like he's a sack of potatoes, and just walks him out and takes him out to her van. Now she can't go anywhere because he's out of control. But this was the best thing in the world. Now, often people that talk about how when a kid's in a temper tantrum, say the good thing to do is what? Well, just let them just ignore them. Well, you couldn't ignore this. Why? Because we're in a Walmart and we're out in the woods of North Carolina. I mean, one, he's going to destroy property. Can't let that happen. Two, we got Walmart security out there. They're going to feel a need to engage in this, and that's definitely going to make it worse. Three, if they're not going to get involved, they're probably going to get the police involved in this situation. So it's going to get a lot worse. Four, we're with a lot of country folks who at a certain point may even feel like they need to help you out. Make it much, much worse. Anyways, many factors here that just you couldn't ignore. This behavior had to be engaged, and she did it in the best way possible. Fact of the matter is, this little side thought. Often, when you think about this, when kids are out of control, one key element that often helps folks is that a lot of it is, quote unquote, they'll say attention seeking, and it is. Often it is. And what you'll find that often two ingredients. One is you either take the kid away from the audience or you remove the audience from the child. Well, you can't, this is Walmart, so we can't remove the audience, but we can remove the child from the audience because it takes them away from all this that's kind of feeding the power struggle, all these things that kind of feeding the issue, and all this, the distractions, things that feed into it. And that's what Claire did. And she, of course, she gets them out of this arena of chaos, and now we're in the van. You can't go nowhere, but being in this van, now we've gone from chaos to where we've got these basically four walls, and the world has now narrowed back down to a calmer setting, and we get this thing back under control. Anyway, so I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, this is tremendous. What else are you going to do? I see no other options. This was it. This is about the best it gets. And so I'm thinking very highly of Claire, but now I'm picking up on the audience. I'm picking up on the people around us. And I might think very highly of Claire, but they clearly don't. In fact, they're angry. You can see it in their body language. You can hear it in their voices. They're talking about it. In fact, there's one old man, I still hear his voice in my head today, many, many years ago. I hear say, well, that girl, she needs to take that boy around back and whip his ass. And I'm hearing this. And when I hear this, two thoughts come to mind. My first thought, my immediate thought is, I got you. I get it. I understand. I hate when I go to a Walmart or a grocery store and I see this little kid, this little dictator who's just kind of out of control and just making everybody's life miserable. And I'm seeing these poor parents who don't seem to have any control over the situation, I get angry too. I get frustrated. I want to help them out myself. I'm with you. I understand that. But then this second thought hit me, and it really hit me. It hit me now what I knew about this little boy that no one else in this county knew, other than the foster family raising him and the therapist with him. In fact, I'll tell you, I've been working child welfare and mental health since, Lord, 1987. So I've been doing it for a little while. And in all this time, this little boy, Chris, he is one of two kids, just the worst sexual, physical abuse kids I'd ever worked with. Two of the worst. He's just one of the two worst that I've ever worked. I mean, this child, and to break your heart, this child, he was being horrendously, physically, sexually abused pre-verbal, before he even could speak. And not just him, he witnessed horrendous abuse. He was, in his family, he was one of five children. One of five children. So 4 boys, 1 little girl. He witnessed it happening to all of them. He witnessed it happening to all of them. Chris was the first kid I had ever really come across who disassociated. Don't know if you're familiar with that term and what that means. It means different things for different people. But basically, it's an escape method for kids. In Chris's situation, basically what that meant was he would go to another place whenever he would get stressed. Whenever he gets stressed in his mind or hurt, he could just go somewhere else. This kind of give you an idea of how long ago this was. If you remember the movie Free Willy, old movie years ago about these kids and their need to save some well from, save a well from a park. This is a movie that came out back when, before DVDs even, back when there were VHSs. Well, apparently this old VHS tape was playing all the time in the trailer where these kids lived and where all this stuff was going on. And Chris, man, this kid, whenever he would get stressed, he would go into the movie, Free Willy. He would go into this movie, and when he would go into the Free Willy, that's all he would talk about is our need to save this well. And that was his form of shock. That was his form of just escape, and there was just no forcing him out of that. Often you just had to kind of wait till he crashed for the night, went to sleep, and hopefully Chris came back in the morning. Chris was, well, I'll tell you something. I don't know if you had any experience with like psych units or psych hospitals. If you ever have, and you ever visit, you'll notice some things are a bit different there than other hospital units or homes. They're set up different. For one thing you'll notice real quick is that they won't tend to have lights down like I have or lamps around here in the main units. Often the lights will be set up into the ceiling, and often behind a very thick glass or even a grate. The reason for that is because people will hurt themselves with it. They'll break the glass if they can break it, or they'll electrocute themselves. Often with windows, you obviously wouldn't have the windows like I have here, in my home office, but it's often that either hurricane type glass or again that grate, because people will hurt themselves. And I've been working in psych hospitals. One thing that you always have to be careful about. You often in the main floor, people already don't seem to find a lot of plugs around because, again, people find creative ways of hurting themselves. Chris was the first little bit, 5 or 6 years old, that I ever come across who would rub at his Christ to rub at his fingers, trying to rub it off till bleeding, and say, if I didn't have this wouldn't happen to me. I'd never seen a little kid do that before. Or when I called him, I'd never seen that before. And part of the reason Chris could do that, as horrible, painful that is, part of the reason Chris could do that was because he had been through so much abuse, his pain threshold was gone. He didn't feel pain anymore. I seen the kid outside playing and get hit with the branch of a tree, and I thought maybe he had really hurt, broken that arm. There's some bad to that arm. And this kid, he just shook it off, just kept on going. I was talking earlier about kids having those temper tantrums and how you see those crocodile tears. I've never seen Chris cry. Never seen, not even crocodile tears. He didn't feel pain. He didn't feel it. And so I'm sitting here in this Walmart and I'm processing all of this. And it just really hit me. I think, sir, if we take this little boy around back to whip his ass, it would not have the impact on him that you're thinking. The fact of the matter is, you would just be another monster in his life. You'd just be another monster in his life because this is a child of trauma. And when it comes to children of trauma, we have to have another approach. Because the things that have worked traditionally with us, the things that we have relied on that were fine, probably were fine with us, they just don't work.